I have been designing treasure hunts for my 4 grandchildren for about 15 years. I'm very fortunate that they all live within a few miles and I get to interact with them frequently. The treasure hunts began when exploring outside the house and looking for bugs in bushes and under rocks. Next step was using plastic insects, spiders, snakes, and other critters and hiding them. These hunts were done inside and outside and got more complex over time. At first, just finding them was sufficient reward, but motivation was increased by providing a treasure when 10 critters were found. As they grew, I made the treasure hunts more complex with many steps, and I tried to sneak in some learning experiences. Before they could read, I started using pictures as clues. The hunt would begin with a picture of a hiding place somewhere in the house. When they found that place, there was another picture of a different hiding place. After many intermediate finds, they finally found the treasure, which was a book or a toy. For a variation on this, I made a custom jigsaw puzzle of the picture of where the prize was hidden. At the beginning of the hunt, I gave them a stack of pictures, each showing where one jigsaw piece was hidden. After finding all the pieces, they had to put them together to get a picture of where the treasure was actually hidden. I kept looking for ways to make the hunts interesting and challenging. Building various props or puzzles kept both me and the grandchildren interested. The prizes also helped. One example is this treasure box with multiple lids stacked like Russian dolls. Each lid is secured by a pair of different bolt or screw fasteners. A different tool is needed for each pair. The first clue is to the box location. With the box, there is a clue to find the first needed tool. After the first lid is removed, there is a second lid and a clue to find the next needed tool. This continues until the last lid is removed, where there is a clue to find the actual treasure. As they developed reading skills, written quizzes and puzzles became part of the hunt, along with boxes that could grade their answer. For example, this is a true-false box that has 8 sliders for answer input. Push in for true, pull out for false. When all 8 sliders are in their correct positions, the box can be opened to get to the next clue or the treasure location. This is the multiple choice box with 4 knobs, each marked with 8 possible positions. Each knob is connected to a disc with a flat side. All 4 sides must be in line to clear the latch plate for the box to close and open. When the grandchildren got older, they realized they could crack these boxes open by applying opening pressure while rotating or sliding the inputs. They could feel when each input passed through the locked-unlocked transition. The next generation of puzzle boxes were electronic and used a motor to close and open the locking latch. For example, the math puzzle box had 8 identically shaped answer pieces, and the box had 8 locations where the pieces could fit. Each location corresponded to a specific math problem, 1 through 8. Each answer piece was labeled with the correct answer to one of the 8 math problems. Each answer piece had 3 embedded magnets, one on each side to hold the pieces to the box, and the middle one in a unique position that identified the piece. Inside, 8 magnetic sensing reed switches were positioned under the corresponding correct positions of the 8 magnets. The reed switches were all connected in series, so there was a continuity only when all answer pieces were in the correct position. These 8 magnetic switches were wired in series with a limit switch, a geared motor, and a pair of AA batteries. The limit switch was normally closed and opened when the locking latch was moved to its open position. Wires from the motor were also connected to 2 screws on the underside of the lid. Battery power was applied to these screws to run the motor in the opposite direction to close the locking latch. Reversing the applied power opened the box, a useful feature when debugging or if something failed. A second version of this design was called the backward jokes puzzle box. There were 10 answers to pun questions, also called dad or grandpa jokes, on the right side of the lid, and 22 question pieces. To open the box, 10 of these question pieces had to be matched with the best pun answer on the lid. For example, the best question for the answer hypotenuse was, what do you call a toilet being flushed in an airplane? A third version of this design was called the cross-number puzzle box. There were 36 locations where answer pieces could be placed. There were 23 answer pieces, the numbers 0 through 9, and duplicates. The unique positions of 2 or 3 magnets were used to encode each of the 10 numbers. Doing 4 different complex math calculations each produced 5-digit results, 2 for down and 2 for across. The theme of one large treasure hunt was locks. I built a box that demonstrated how a pin lock worked. The top was transparent, so all of the mechanisms were visible. A sliding tray had a small compartment for a paper clue. The tray was prevented from sliding by 5 spring-loaded split pins. All 5 pins needed to be properly positioned to allow the tray to slide. The puzzle was to use Legos to build a working key to free the slide. Another box was the gravity puzzle box that used 4 intersecting sliding steel bars to lock the box. By lifting one of the 4 sides of the box in proper sequence, the box could be locked and unlocked. As it turned out, a few seconds of shaking by a young child also works. The theme of another large treasure hunt was coding methods. The simplest was a secret coding wheel for substitution codes. Another used rebus to code the clues. Morse code was also used. A microprocessor development kit was programmed to beep out the code, but a voice message would have worked as well. Another clue required solving 32 math problems. Each answer was code for a letter. Together, these letters spelled the clue. My wife and I host Thanksgiving dinner every year for our extended families, up to 22 guests. I have designed elaborate treasure hunts that typically take about an hour to complete. Something to do while the turkey cooks. These are primarily for the non-parents, but usually some other guests get involved too. The finale of the hunt is a treasure box about 2 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. 4 separate locks keep it closed. At the beginning of the hunt, there are 4 independent hunts that can be done in parallel. The treasure at the end of each of these is a key or combination that opens one of the locks. When all 4 locks are removed, the box can be opened. The box is animated using lots of rubber bands and sometimes battery-powered motors. Once opened, the box proceeds on its own, at least in theory. It begins with a pop-up lid followed by the 4 sides flattening. Then a bunch of stuff is thrown into the air to create indoor fireworks. A tower is erected, and finally a banner is unfurled and spun wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving. At least that's how it's supposed to go. This video is of the first Thanksgiving treasure hunt, as well as the first of many that did not go as expected. The sides did not flatten and needed a lot of encouragement. The stuff launchers were released by triggers connected to the sides, so the stuff did not get thrown into the air as planned, and finally the tower got hung up and also needed encouragement. I had tested the box several times before the show, and it worked reliably. The postmortem found that the rubber bands lose energy if stretched for many hours. The box was loaded the day before, so the rubber bands did not deliver the expected energy. The box was reworked and upgraded before the following Thanksgiving. More rubber bands were added and some launcher triggers reworked. Also, a Halloween sound effect toy was added to provide creaking door sounds as the sides fell. After more testing and several additional small improvements, the box was ready for season 2. It worked, but unfortunately, there are no videos. This video is of the second season of the second generation Thanksgiving treasure box, actually performing as expected. The first season did not go as expected. It is based on the same format as the first generation, but had completely redesigned launchers, tower, and banner. The 10 stuff launchers were made from plastic cups and operated like a slingshot. Anything that fit in the cup could be launched. The cup's rubber bands were stretched so the cup could be coupled to its trigger. Lifting a lever connected to the trigger released the cup. These levers were lifted sequentially by a small cart pulled by a spring motor. The inner tower had 4 nested segments. Each segment was powered by rubber bands connected via strings to pulleys on the segment's rotation axis. When released, the first segment carrying the other 3 segments rotated 90 degrees and locked in their vertical position. This lock also released the second segment, which then rotated 180 degrees and locked in its vertical position, and then released the third segment, which rotated, and released the banner segment, which rotated, and then released the banner to expand and rotate. I used online quizzes for the third generation Thanksgiving treasure hunts, since all the grandchildren had cell phones and were internet savvy. There was a 10-question quiz in a specific category such as famous people for each lock. Its combination was revealed for a perfect score of all 10 correct. The first season quizzes were picture-based and encouraged the use of Google Picture Search. The second season quizzes were much simpler, true-false questions about fake news on the internet. This video is the first season of the third generation box. It did not go as expected. The disc launcher was rubber band powered with no speed control, so the discs all launched in about a second. The card feeder was inconsistent, so the card throwing was initially slow and irregular. The first real failure was the motor that released the banner tower jammed and had to be manually released. After the tower grew to maximum height, the banner began spinning but failed to deploy. This failure also required manual intervention. For the second season, the disc launcher was reworked so it was driven by a motor. The discs were released slower and were spaced equally. The card feeder roller and throwing roller were coated with silicone rubber to make them stickier. This greatly improved the consistency and spacing of the thrown cards. The tower release and banner release mechanisms were also reworked. This video is a test of the second season, third generation treasure box. After opening, it launched 21 flying discs, followed by throwing 52 playing cards, and finally releasing the banner tower and the spinning banner. This test was repeated several times without a failure. This video is the second season performance. It did not go as expected. The first problem was caused by a micro switch that signaled the end of the flying disc launches. It was in the wrong location because its mount came loose. This caused the card thrower not to start. Manual intervention repositioned the switch so the show could go on. The second failure was the shaft that held the banner came loose and tilted, so the banner jammed into the side of the lifting mechanism. There was still a lot of force trying to raise the tower, so it was very difficult to free the jammed banner. It took more than a minute. This process caused other problems, so after clearing, the banner could not stand straight. An epic failure all around. Never mind, the lottery tickets were removed and distributed to the participants. During the following week, I fixed all of these issues and several others that I could now see because of heightened paranoia. As I worked, I kept repeating, millions of things can happen, but only a few of them are good. We'll see what happens in Season 3.